The context is all wrong. There's a 600-year time lapse in the way. The language is all wrong. It just doesn't work. It is foolishness in its most extreme form. And yet, you will see, it's not just Ahmed Deedat that has made this argument. I've listened to Jamal Badawi make the same argument from John 14 and 16. You will hear this repeated over and over and over again. And so let's listen to Ahmed Deedat making these points.
You see, the Christians have developed a sickness of changing, translating names of people, which you have no right to do. You have no right to translate people's names. A proper name is a proper name. Deedat is Deedat. You can't, you say, well, Deedat in Afrikaans, but Deedat is Deedat. So they changed the name Yeshua. Esau in Hebrew, classical Yeshua, they changed it to Jesus. Jesus is a Latinized form of the Hebrew word Esau.
No, it's a Latinized form of the Hebrew word Yeshua. Jehovah is salvation, and that is what is in the original language. Anyone who would, for example, base any exegetical commentary on the Quran outside of its original languages, that would be an erroneous thing to do. Now, let me make one observation at that point. While many Muslims think that Arabic is sort of like the heavenly language, and since the Quran is written in Arabic, then that becomes the only Quran that makes any sense. There are clearly loan words from other languages in the Quran, especially from Syriac. And Syriac and Coptic and other languages like that do have an input into the background of the Arabic version of the Quran. And so when we look at what particular words mean in the Quran and where they came from, what their backgrounds are, it's perfectly legitimate to look at those backgrounds, just as when you look at a New Testament text, looking at the Greek Septuagint, looking at the Hebrew that lies behind it is very much important. But what he's saying here, just from a linguistic perspective, is almost laughable in most of what he is going to attempt to do here, especially when he tries to get to the idea of finding Ahmed as the spirit of truth in John 16.
You see, Jesus in his second coming, if he comes and if people recognize him, I say, shout, Jesus, Jesus. I say, they won't even turn to look at you. Because they've never heard the word Jesus in his life.
Now, catch that, in his second coming, if he comes. There is a doctrine of the second coming of Jesus in Islam, and Jesus will destroy the cross and pigs, and exactly what that means depends on which Muslim you're talking to, but anyways, he will come and will be a Muslim, of course, because from their perspective Jesus was a Muslim, dressed like a Muslim, prayed like a Muslim, so on and so forth. But what he's saying here is that if you cried out Jesus, then he wouldn't know who you're talking to because he's never heard this in all of his life. That's the kind of Jesus that the Muslim believes in.
Never heard the word Jesus. He said, Christ, Christ. I said, look, he'll never turn to look at you because he never heard the word Christ in his life. These are translations. He said, I am the Messiah, translated Christ, coming from the Greek word Christos. He never heard the word. This is later on. This is what people did to his name. So they call him Jesus, he never heard it. Christ, he never heard it. So Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. He didn't know who you shouting. Well, who you calling? He never heard the term. But they translated the names. Jesus tells his disciple Simon. He says, Simon, thou art Cephas. Cephas means you're like a rock. And on this rock I'll build my church. You are like a rock. You know, a steady fellow like a fighting Irishman. His name is Simon. So he said, thou art Cephas. In his own mother tongue, you are Cephas. Like a rock you. So they translated Cephas into Petros, into Greek. And from Petros they got Peter. Peter never heard the word Peter in his life. Imagine. They have Saint Peter in Rome. I say it should be Saint Simon in Rome. Look, it's some rhyme. Then the 13th self-appointed disciple, apostle of Jesus, self-appointed.
To catch that, the 13th self-appointed. I guess, you take Matthias, and then you just, Paul is really, 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 really disliked. by Muslims, for the obvious reason, of course, that Islamic theology is completely contradictory to the New Testament and to Pauline theology.
Jesus Christ meets him on the way on the Damascus road, as Paul says. He said, I heard a voice, Paul says, in the book of Acts, chapter 26, verse 14. He says, I heard a voice speaking unto me, unto Paul, and saying in the Hebrew tongue, in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? Why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. Acts chapter 26, verse 14. He said, Saul, Saul. They changed it to Paul, Paul. I said, look, Saint Saul, the Saint Paul in London, the big cathedral. Saint Saul rhymes better, Saint Simon rhymes better. But no, they must Latinize it. It's an inferiority complex that all subject nations have. You want to make your name sound like that of your ruling race. We are not.
Now, if you're sitting there going, why is he taking all this time to talk about stuff that's so silly? I mean, it's the New Testament itself that records the switch from Saul to Paul, and it's not about ruling races or anything else. It's just some people's names did change. Peter would have understood Peter because he himself did see that when you look at his epistle, and he did use that. And you listen to all this, and you might say, doesn't this just demonstrate he doesn't know what he's talking about? You got to realize, who is his audience? Who is his audience? What is he attempting to accomplish with this kind of showmanship, this kind of flashy, look how much I know, look how much Bible I can quote? Remember, when you're talking to an audience of people who can't quote any Bible, if you can quote some Bible, you look like you really know a lot. And that's what's going on here. He's not trying to convince Christian scholars. He knows a Christian scholar is going to be looking at him like he just landed from another planet, but that's not his audience. Those aren't the people who are buying his books and buying his videos and paying to fly him around the world to deliver these lectures against Christianity.
Exempt from that sickness. Look, it's a psychological thing. When somebody is ruling you, your bosses, we want to also change our names to sound like our bosses' names. We have beautiful names, Fatima, we say Tima. We have Yusuf, we say Joseph. Joe. Don't we do that? Same sickness. The Christians had it, and now we are cultivating it. We say Khadija, I said, what is that? What do you call it? Now this is a sickness. You see, you don't want to be recognized as a Muslim, so it's a Tima. Instead of Fatima, daughter of the Prophet ﷺ, the leader of the women of paradise, beautiful name, remember. He was a Tima. He was a Joe. May Allah save us from that sickness. It's a sickness, old sickness, but we must be on guard. The Christians, what they did was, they changed the names Esau to Jesus. They changed the name Christ, Messiah to Christ. Saul to Paul. Cephas to Peter. So they must have done the very same thing with Muhammad, Ahmed. Same. And you see, it's a sickness. Now you did it in 1,000 different languages, 2,000 different words. How are you going to grapple with this? So in his original language, in Hebrew, the nearest to that, Ahmad is Muhammana. But since we can't lay our hand on the original writings because they haven't got it, they have thousands of manuscripts of the Christian scriptures, but there's not one in Hebrew. The man is a Jew, he's talking to other Jews, he goes out of his way, the most learned of the Jews, Saul. He goes out of his way to speak Hebrew to him, but the common fishermen and laborers, he goes and speaks Greek. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes lots of sense because obviously the Gospels were meant to go into all the world, and the common language of the world at that time, thanks to Alexander the Great, and then followed by that by the Roman Empire, was Koine Greek, not Hebrew. And it probably wouldn't have been Hebrew anyways, probably would have been Aramaic at that particular point in time. So yes, makes perfect sense to anyone who actually knows a little something about biblical backgrounds.